This is a production of Cornell University.
So, and what I put together is, I guess it's a trends talk. I pieced together things that either we know that are going on out there in the business because we have some involvement with it from a company perspective, or it's things that we're picking up in the industry. Some of it is things that I did a little research, and just like you guys, I actually did a little research work and put some things together, so I feel like I'm giving my oral report this afternoon. And some of it comes from some things that we've picked up from some of the trade shows and seminar programs and so forth. And it's just kind of a collective what's going on out there, and where's the direction going as it relates to plants and so forth. So I pieced it together. Now, I have not delivered this to anybody yet, so you guys are truly my guinea pigs. And since it's a nice intimate audience, if you've got questions, or I hope you have questions or even comments and so forth, we can make this more of a discussion along the way too as well. But anyway, so I just pieced some stuff together. We are, as a company, we're involved in product development. We are a plant breeder. We also produce our own genetics. We are principally in the flowering ornamentals part of the business. Lots of flowering annuals that we create and then produce, starting either seed form or vegetatively propagated material. But we have, as of late, begun to venture more into vegetables as well, since we watched the home garden vegetable craze start to kick in a few years ago before the recession, and it has continued to kick in. And also have branched out, not to use too many puns, to get into ornamental shrubs too as well, and to better serve the true nursery part of the business in addition to our greenhouse customers. So that's us as plant breeder. We're also a wholesale distributor is what we call ourselves. We're a broker too as well, selling our own genetics, seed and young plants to greenhouse growers of all sizes throughout the country, in Canada, throughout North America, as well as we have distribution companies in various markets around the world that do the same thing. And we try to be a full service sales organization or broker to our customers. We sell our own genetics, but we also sell all of the other seed companies and other plant breeders genetics too as well, so that we can be kind of a one-stop shop. So that's a little bit about the structure of the business. We're based in far west suburban Chicago, Illinois, where it looks more or less like this, although you guys got first coat of snow and we just got rid of ours. Home base is in Chicago. We have distribution in Western Europe. We also have a breeding division facility up in Enkhuizen in Holland, as well as the distribution in Western Europe. We are also in China with production. We are in Japan, Korea, Australia, South Africa, and then throughout Central and South America in distribution, as well as our production. Most of our production is done in Central America too as well. But we're really a North American-based business with these subsidiaries around the world, and it's because it's a world market, as you guys know. So anyway, a little bit about us. As Bill said, I'm the HR guy with Ball. I joined Ball 11 years ago. I have no plant background. I was a lousy science student. I have a business degree, and I spent about 20 years or so in the retail industry working for various department store companies and so forth. And it was fun, had a great time, but I said, you know what, it's kind of time to do something else, and I found Ball, and they were down the street from me, and I've spent the last 11 years learning about the plant business, both the science side as well as the commercial side, which is great because my wife and I are both big backyard gardeners. We have no lawn in the backyard, I'm very proud to say. It's all garden, so it'd be much less to have to mow. All right, what I put together. It's a collection of things that again, from things that we've heard about that are going on out there in the industry, from some research that I did and so forth. And so I thought I'd start out with this, is there's this little quote. We have a plant breeder, actually she's our most senior plant breeder. She's kind of coined it this way. She keeps talking about this new relationship between plants and people. In other words, directionally where we think the industry is going. And the illustration, by the way, I threw it on there on purpose. There is a professor at Columbia University by the last name of Despommier. First name is Dixon, and he published a book last year on this concept of urban vertical farming. The idea being as the populations around the major metropolitan centers around the world continue to grow, particularly in places like Tokyo and Seoul and other very large cities where, from a residential standpoint, everybody lives up because there's very little land mass. And the idea with farming, particularly as it relates to sustainability and so forth, is how do we get the crops closer to where the population is, rather than having to truck so far away and so forth. And so he wrote this book about the concept of putting together sophisticated vertical farming systems. Kind of a pipe dream, but it's being talked about a lot because a lot of the technologies are already there, are already in place. It's just a matter of can something like this happen? So it's kind of a big picture thing to kind of kick off. All right, here's where I did my research. I went online, Googled gardening trends 2011, and this is what I found. And I found like 3 or 4 different authors writing about these kinds of things, and they all use literally the same terms. So they're either emailing to each other all the time, or they're all kind of picking up on some of the same trends. And this is what I found. Gardening with a purpose, these are all phrases that literally the people wrote about. Urban farming, ecoscaping, sustainability, of course, which we talk about all the time. New urbanism, vertical gardening, edible ornamentals, it goes on and on and on and on. And so I thought, well, how are these all trends? And if you take a look at it, when you guys see these, what comes to mind? What's your reaction when you see these kinds of phrases? I'm really asking you. What comes to mind?
It seems very small scale oriented, so that it's a market. It's not the business driven. It's the target market driven.
That's true. That's right. That's right. What else?
It shows a trend towards the type of people that are buying plants.
Could be. There could be. Absolutely. You get the sense that it's more personal, and particularly as it relates to things like urban farming, urbanism, vertical gardening, gardening with a purpose, and so forth. But it was interesting that I found different authors all writing about the same thing. So I thought, okay, well, let's spend some time just kind of going through these. First, there was, and what I tried to do as it relates to these, to kind of illustrate if these are trends or not, is I went looking for examples of each of these. And that's actually the rest of what these slides are all about, because I found examples of virtually everything. Real stuff that's going on out there. There was a trade show and education program that ran, I think it was the second week of January. It's a national association called the Western Nursery and Landscape Association. It's been around apparently for almost 100 years. Covers both the United States and Canada. It's an interesting mix of professionals. It's greenhouse growers, it's garden centers, it's landscape architects, landscape contractors, and then other people that are in other parts of the green industry. So it's not just a grower group, it's a pretty broad group. And they had this seminar program in January. My boss attended it, and a couple of other people did too. And one of the things that they did, because they really tried to make this education program a bit different than the typical trade show. And so one of the things they did was they put together a panel discussion. And so they had, I'm trying to think, well, my boss was one of them, but they had a landscape architect, a professor, a fairly well-known regional garden center owner, kind of a mix of people. And they went up and they talked about where they think horticulture or gardening is going to be in the year 2060. In other words, about 50 years from now. And so I just pulled some notes from what they had to say. And I'll read them to you because they're a little hard to read. They were talking about things like plants will move to where they serve a purpose, not just serve people. Plants will go from providing beauty to actually working. In other words, being used as part of a system. Landscapes will be green machines, living machines, and landscapers will be the machinists putting the machines together. And they talked about the concept of, rather than thinking of ourselves as consumers, what if we thought of ourselves as citizens? Kind of changes the equation a little bit, changes the mindset a little bit. And people will be growing plants for air purification, rain collection, cooling, eating, water retention, and also maybe for beauty too as well. So it's pretty profound thinking going into the future. So a completely different approach to the whole idea of using plants. It's just a trade show. So gardening with a purpose. All right, here's some examples. Gardening used as the backdrop for educational programs. we're seeing more and more of this between, well, several of us actually where I work. I'll get an email or a phone call from time to time, other people in the company will too. They're constantly asking us if we can provide educational resources for people that are doing gardening programs, whether it's schools or parks or community organizations and so forth. And so one of the things that we've done to try to help out is we've launched a brand in the past couple of years. Actually, last year was the first year. Starting with going after the home vegetable gardening customer under the banner Burby Home Gardens, licensing the Burby name. And as part of the effort is we're putting a lot of PR into Burby Home Gardens by using it as the vehicle to put together some educational program. In fact, what we recently did for the first time is we held a grant contest, and we collaborated with the National Gardening Association and put out this contest, and we got over, it was almost 250 applications from all around the country. A whole bunch of us evaluated them all. We literally read one after another to try to prioritize them, and awarded 5 of them, and they're all getting a pretty big prize to help them with their gardening education program. So we really see that proliferating, whether it's youth gardening or adult gardening. And not just teaching the gardening, but using the gardening to teach people various science topics, math, even English and literature in terms of writing, and also some of the business and marketing skills too as well, from harvesting and selling too as well. Community gardens are proliferating in a lot of areas. CSAs, the community-sponsored agriculture, with the idea that people in a community pay a farmer in advance of the season for a season's worth of produce. So that way you get a harvest throughout the season, and the farmer gets the funds up front to do the production. Farmers markets, I don't know if you guys have any around the area here, but they're proliferating in all kinds of communities. So that's just one set of examples. Second one, related to urban farming, and I found this was pretty interesting. This is a wall of tomatoes. And in fact, it's a variety of tomatoes that Campbell Soup uses for its famous tomato soup. And they're a big philanthropy. They try to help out communities in a lot of different ways. And they put together this urban gardening program. This was in Harlem, both to obviously get education out, but also be able to allow production and harvest to serve the local community. And there's a couple of other organizations, urbanfarming.org, and then another organization's done similar types of things in LA and Harlem and so forth. And they're trying to get, trying to take advantage of what space is available in some of the urban cities to put together farming systems, small farming systems and plots of land to provide food for that local community, and also taking advantage of technology, allowing for vertical growing. So it's this Despomier thing, but on a much smaller scale, is one way to think about it. And that's actually going on out there. This is Grant Park in the downtown of the city of Chicago. Grant Park is the big park area along the lake right in the center of downtown. There's a small farm, I guess you call it, a garden area. It's all a combination of vegetables, herbs, and flowering plants. Similar kind of program. There's an organization called Growing Power. It's a not-for-profit, and they work with both a landscaper as well as the city parks department, and have put together this garden. And it's a show garden, but they also actually harvest from the garden, and again it goes to local farmers markets to be sold as local produce around the city. But they also use it again as an education format too. They take students and teach them planting, weeding, harvesting, so they get a chance to see the whole cycle for the season. And then also they're responsible for helping package and process the fruit and vegetables and herbs and so forth, and actually sell them in the farmers market. So they also teach them customer service skills and sales skills and marketing skills and so forth. So it's more than just a garden. And the same thing here with a second farm that's literally on a plot of land on the near south side to help people in that community learn how to grow their own vegetables and harvest their own vegetables. So these are kind of some real life examples. I threw this on here because it was a week ago yesterday. I was reading Sunday newspaper, I think it was the New York Times, and there was this article about this guy who's an ex-Marine. He's an avocado farmer in San Diego. happens to be an organic avocado farmer, but he's an avocado farmer. And he and his wife, in the last several years, have put together a program to teach returning veterans how to farm. And it's an actual educational program. They've hooked up with a local college. And so they put the whole thing together, and they teach returning veterans the whole process of farming, because whether it's the ag department or it's other associations, and so they're all talking about the fact in the next 10 years, half of America's farmers are going to retire. And there isn't the next generation necessarily coming in behind them, at least not in the numbers that we need. So it gives the veterans a chance to learn a trade as they come back from wherever they've been in service. It's also, especially for returning veterans, it's therapeutic in a way, because they're doing something very positive, very constructive after the experiences they've just been, especially if they serve in the front lines overseas. And I just thought it was a pretty neat program. So it's pretty cool. And they also mentioned in the article that there's a couple of universities, including the University of Nebraska, is doing the same thing through their ag college, specifically targeted to returning veterans. All right, another one, ecoscaping. I couldn't tell you a few years ago if you ever heard the term rain garden, but now it's becoming very popular. And you find rain barrels at garden centers and Home Depot and everywhere else. People are really starting to pay attention to how to better utilize resources, whether it be water, obviously chemicals and fertilizers and so forth, but also even as it relates to taking care of your own property. People are starting to take a look at these expanses of lawn that we traditionally have had, and seeing if there's better ways of use of the land, both in terms of the aesthetics, but also in terms of just cutting down the use of all the energy that you have to put into maintaining a lawn. So I think that's what they mean by ecoscaping. So it's things like putting together more sustainable types of gardens in your yard, using less chemicals and so forth. These are a couple of examples of things that we're working on with either compostable or completely biodegradable packaging containers. This container we have been working on for a few years to try to perfect. This is a resin, but it is completely biodegradable. You can plant the plant in the pot in the ground, and it will all go into the land and break down. Same thing with this, which is literally just a paper wrap with no bottom in it. It's called the soilless wrap. We're trying to perfect this so we can make it commercial. And we've discovered how we can also print on it too. So not only is it biodegradable, so for the consumer or the landscaper, they can literally just take the plant and put it right into the ground, saving both the waste as well as the labor and the expense of pulling away all the pots and containers. But we can also educate the consumer by what we put on it too, as well, to help them and make it easier to buy and to plant. So these are all different kinds of things that are going on in the industry as it relates to being more eco-friendly. A couple more examples. This was something I picked up, the Southern Nevada Water Authority. This is a Las Vegas home. They got a rebate for replacing their 2,200 square feet of lawn with water-efficient plants. So literally, communities paying citizens for doing something different than planting a lawn, as an example. So things that look more like this. Some different examples. Have you guys heard of the acronym LEED, L-E-E-D? Okay, good, very good. There was a engineering company in New York that did a retrofit of their existing building, not a new building, but they did a retrofit, and then filed the application to get LEED certification for it. And they were the first ones, I think it happened, well, technically it happened in 2009, but they were the first ones to get awarded LEED credit for plant use as part of their retrofit. This is the interior, and that's part of the exterior. So the whole idea of LEEDs, which is more sustainable building use, both in terms of materials as well as the environment that you create in the building and so forth, is now being extended to the use of plants too as well. So it's another way of thinking of plants as function as opposed to plants just as an aesthetic. You know where this is?
Chicago.
Chicago. It's the rooftop of City Hall. And this has actually been here for several years. It's an experiment, but it's a way to figure out, in old, large, energy-consuming buildings, do systems like this help at least with temperature control and those types of things. So another example. And then I found these just by poking around a bit. Again, this idea of going vertical, even if it's just for looks and so forth, as opposed to just a concrete wall. You know, much nicer. And you can see in these urban spaces more and more green coming in. That's my favorite. Okay. I'm from Chicago, you guys can tell. This is a shot looking north on Michigan Avenue several years ago. Looks like typical cityscape, and this is what it looks like today. These bunkers, I'm not even sure what to call them, have been installed over the last several years up and down Michigan Avenue, along River Road on both sides of the river and so forth. And as you can tell from the plantings, really planted. Combination of some tropicals, lots of trailing material, annuals, perennials, ornamental shrubs and so forth. And the whole idea is it is for tourism to help, you know, the city look more attractive for visitors and so forth. But what the city is finding is it also provides lots of other advantages too as well, and other cities are finding the same thing. It helps create a different kind of environment, which in essence does things like, it obviously makes an improvement in property values. It actually has an impact on crime, because if a blighted area is blighted, it's more of an invitation for criminal activity. If it's not blighted, it looks like, you know, a more safe place, and therefore you don't have as many problems. So again, using plants for other purposes other than just beauty.
Does the city have real numbers on that? Because I believe all of that, but that's always the limiting
I know,
in this, because we
I know.
all believe this.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, I hope there's
I
some
don't
way
know.
they
I
can
don't
capture
know.
that.
I don't know if Chicago. I don't know if the city has. I know that there have been research studies that have tried to quantify some of this. So they are out there. And that is one of the challenges is how to get more quantifiable information about how these types of landscapes and the use for them and so forth actually adds value. Because if we can quantify it more, I think it would make this an even stronger trend. I think it'll even develop it further. Okay, so that's one part. So we just talk about the grower a little bit. These again are some additional quotes from that panel from the Green Center program that ran in St. Louis last month that I mentioned about earlier. Because they also were talking about, as it relates to where the industry is going from a consumer perspective and a grower perspective. And some of the growers were talking about the fact that in the future they believe that plants will be manipulated, and they use the word manipulated, not just by genetics. Somebody wants me. But also how they're grown. And I can tell you as a plant breeder, that's a pretty profound statement, because we're very proud of ourselves in terms of creating a new product, because we go through all the research and the effort to figure out how's the product going to perform, how should it be positioned in the marketplace, whether it's what purpose it would best serve, what kind of containers should it be started in, how should it be sold in the stores, and so forth. I mean, as a plant breeder, we try to do all of that work so that we can get the product in the marketplace. And the growers are saying, yeah, that's all fine, but we've got even more important challenges at our end of the stage, and we've got to be able to produce plants that meet the very specific needs of whether it's the landscaper or it's the retailer and then ultimately the consumer. So they see even more influence as it relates to how plants are grown and how they're used, being put on the grower too as well. Concept of on-demand plants, in other words, wanting supply of plants 12 months a year. Even though it's a seasonal business, that they see the demand could grow to where, for whatever the purposes are, whatever the use might be, it might be more of a year-round business. Another one for the grower is plants need to be programmable for retail promotion. If I'm a supplier to Lowe's or a Home Depot or Walmart and so forth, and if I put together a Sunday flyer that promotes XYZ product, and that flyer covers, I don't know, 200 stores, let's say, well, that plant has to be in that store in good performance that Sunday in those 200 stores. That's what they mean by programmable. And that's what the growers got to figure out. You know, how do I get that volume of plants to be ready for delivery to hit that ad? Gardeners themselves, they think, especially young gardeners, the next generation, also want programmable plants. In other words, they want plants to do specific things. and they want that instant color and so forth. We're no longer with a generation that's willing to get down on their hands and knees early in the spring, plant lots of beds, plant lots of plants, knowing that they're not really going to get the result until July, middle of the summer, give or take. People want kind of instant gratification when they go out and buy plants. Then a different concept is talking about the fact that they see that retailers may become smaller and more local, even the big box stores possibly, which is kind of an interesting concept. I worked for Home Depot for a couple of years back in the late 90s, and they were talking about small store formats back then, particularly as fill-in stores in larger communities where there are already existing stores, and if you built one more big store, you start to cannibalize the sales from the other stores. And the chains have tried, I think, different approaches, but this might more relate to the whole idea of doing things more locally. That might be where this concept is coming from. Okay, another topic, sustainability. You guys are all familiar with the word sustainability, right? One of the things that I know is probably coming, because there's already been some effort, is the idea of trying to develop more uniform standards, I guess would be the best way to describe it, in terms of how do we measure or whether or not a product is sustainable and what's the definition of sustainability in terms of its purpose and use and so forth. And in fact, one of my colleagues at work had been involved with an effort nationwide, a broad effort with a number of different agriculture industries represented to try to put together a set of standards. And the challenge is because there are so many different agendas, if you will, being represented by different parts of the agriculture industry, that it's hard to come together with a common set of standards. So far, we haven't been successful, but I'm assuming at some point that it's coming. And as soon as we get to both the idea of quantifying more in terms of how plants can perform and how they can be used, as well as a more sustainable set of standards, I think that will really accelerate this whole idea of converting from chemical use and so forth to much more sustainable practices as part of the industry. Because that's my sense is where it's going. So think about it this way. You're in a greenhouse, you're running a greenhouse operation, and everything you do ends up being public information. It's all completely transparent. That changes a lot of what you think about in terms of how you manage your greenhouse production. Today, this is what food companies deal with. You guys have recognized this? It's almost on every boxed and canned food item in America, listing all the ingredients, calories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what would happen if we did the same thing? Now suddenly, if we come up with a set of standards, that's how we're going to get measured. And the idea behind trying to come up with our own standards is if we can come up with them so that they're workable for growers, for producers, that's probably far better than if at some point they get legislated and get forced on us. So it's an effort that's still in front of us, but I think it's coming. Okay, consumer. So where do we think the consumer is going? Well, one of the things, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is this whether it's a trend or a fad, but home garden vegetables became popular again a few years ago, and actually a few years before the recession hit. And then with the recession, because of the emphasis on spending less money and so forth, there seemed to be even more interest in the idea of growing your own, and it's become even more popular. So it looks like it's a trend that's going to stay here for a while. Although the rate of growth in sales in home garden vegetables is starting to level off a little bit, I don't think it's going to go away. I think that interest is there because I think it's converging with other more social interests about whether it's again the idea of using vegetables to have a community garden, or it's because you want to feel like you're doing things more sustainably for your own backyard, whatever it might be. But I think vegetable gardening is here to stay. And not just vegetables, but all forms of edibles. Herbs are popular again, and partly because of this renewed interest in cooking. Whether you can't turn on TV without watching some cooking program anymore, or opening up a magazine or seeing something online. So it's kind of a natural extension of the cooking craze is people interested in growing their own. And also fruits and berries too, not just vegetables. I just threw this here. This is a concept we came up with, and we're trying to see if there's interest in this. This is, there's actually 3 seeds in this plant, 3 pelleted seeds to be more factual. What we tried to do is put together a multi-species, different types of lettuce, all pelleted together in one pellet. And that way you can direct sow it into a container like this, grow it out, and have literally in a container a harvest of lettuce 2-3 times before the plant begins to give out. And this is a commercial product. Just to try to see, what different kinds of things that the consumer might be interested in as it relates to vegetables. Also related to home gardening and vegetables and so forth, we traditionally think about the backyard garden where you've got this rectangular plot, you've got rows of beans and corn and so forth, and then some flowers. What we're finding is the consumer, she almost doesn't care anymore. She just kind of mixes it all up. Vegetables and flowers together, vegetables in the front of the yard, not just in the back of the yard, vegetables as ornamentals, not just for harvest and so forth. So we in the industry are still very traditionally thinking, and yet the consumer's just finding ways of putting all different kinds of plants together and using them different ways. She's even more advanced than we are actually in some ways. So as I was saying, here we've got parsley and pansy. It's a picture I actually found. And we talk about things being annuals, we talk about things being seed versus vegetative. Is it a perennial? Is it woody? These are all how we think about it. But here's a corollary. Is this a phone? Is it a GPS? Is it a game player? Is it a music player? For the consumer, they almost don't care. The idea is the opportunity to bundle things together in uses that make sense for the consumer. So we got to sometimes put our mindset in the head, as a consumer as opposed to as a grower, so that we can better understand where the consumer might be going. In other words, we keep talking about how things are in a very traditional approach, talking about things in segregation, whereas the consumer thinks complete integration.
So how does a big company like that, I don't know, when you're marketing this type of idea, like where does it fall in like the plant patent type of categories? Because making a little mix of plants doesn't seem like that big of an idea, especially since people are doing it all the time. But like, how do you sell that legally? Like, when you come up with an idea like that, I don't know.
You talk about the simply salad, or you
Yeah, anything like that, like
a
you're marketing that type of idea of a combination, like. I don't know.
It really depends on, as it relates to plant protection, it depends on how important it is, you think it is to patent or protect the plant. Not everything needs to be patented, and sometimes if you can get products out in a combination like this, and if it takes off, it's okay if somebody else copies it if it brings more volume. So you got to play each situation a little bit differently. Okay, at the same time as it relates to the consumer shopping at the local garden center or one of the chains and so forth, it's still very, very difficult for the average consumer who is not a well-educated, if you will, gardener. Still making it very difficult. These are actual quotes. My boss has a plot of land next to her residence where there's no house on it, and she decided to kind of open it up as a community garden. And literally the neighbors come around and they all have their plot, and they plant vegetables and flowers each spring and so forth. And she was in a conversation with one day, and this is literally what she says. She says, you guys continue to think we know a lot more than we do. It's still very, very difficult, very intimidating to walk into a garden center and try to figure out what to ask for, how to shop, and so forth. Then this was a quote that one of our folks, we talked about last year, we were talking about the same challenge. He said, my friend going into a garden center has about the same experience as my grandmother trying to go into a Best Buy. Very, very difficult, very challenging. So we got to make it easier. Because gardening for the average consumer is not intuitive. And we really have to help her put things together. Gotta make it simpler. And here's another one. Again, not everybody's willing to get down on hands and knees and put all the effort in at the front of the season. They want instant product, instant gratification, instant color. So, one of the things we're trying to take advantage of is a lot of people are doing is taking advantage of electronic communication in all different ways. We finally have started to get into the whole bandwagon of getting on Twitter and Facebook and all those other kinds of things that companies are doing, but we're trying to do it in different ways. One of the big advantages of using different forms of social media is from an advertising standpoint, it's really not even advertising. In advertising, you decide to go after some customer, your target as you refer to it, and you plaster all your advertising in whatever form it comes in and point it directly at that person. Whereas, with the advantage of different forms of social media, it becomes a two-way conversation because you can hear back from the customer. You can actually carry on a dialogue. You can communicate back and forth. So we're trying to learn how to do that. So an example, again, going back to Burpee Home Gardens, is we put together this thing called the Burpee Garden Coach that you can load onto your smartphone and will help you shop, will help you to keep track of your purchases, we'll give you planting tips, we'll give you email or text reminders, however way you want to receive the information throughout the season about how things are going with your garden performance and harvest and so forth. And the whole idea is to create kind of an interchange with the consumer. Another way, and this is going after the retailers, putting together, and this is all online, all the promotional materials that a garden center may want to use in helping promote the wave product that they might be selling in the store, wave being our trend opportunity that we have. And again, it's interactive. Rather than just shoving a bunch of stuff out to a retailer, we make it all available and they can choose what they want and have it produced. And then this is going after the grower. And kind of another form of taking advantage of the technology is we have these 1 to 2 minute quick videos, literally using a flip camera on culture tips and those types of things directly to our grower customers to help them as they're growing out various genetics, particularly our stuff. So anyway, I don't know if this is really a new era coming, but if you get you read about some of the things that are going on out there, particularly as it relates to community efforts, whether again it's for education, it's for the sociability of getting communities together, it's the interest in gardening, it's the interest in maybe doing something other than having a green grass lawn and so forth. But these all might be things that are kind of converging together. And maybe what we are headed towards is kind of the next generation of how people use plants. Today, generally, if you think about it, the whole concept of gardening is all for beauty. It's all for the aesthetics. It's all for the looks. It's a hobby. But what it might be heading towards is landscaping for what's referred to as the 3 E's. One is an economic impact. Again, some of the examples we saw from some of the urban areas. A second one being the environmental impact, kind of the social consciousness part of where we might be heading, but also the emotional impact too as well. I mean, there is this intrinsic connection that people have with other living things, including plants. And maybe that's part of the reason why we're finding this different connection going. But for all these things that we may refer to as trends, what you always have to remember is whenever you see something happening, it's becoming a trend, it's becoming kind of mainstream, there's always a trend going in the opposite direction. Or if not the opposite direction, a very different direction, a counter trend. And so the other thing you gotta remember is everything you think you know is probably wrong because it's going to change again. And that's one of the exciting things, and the reason why I put some of this stuff together for you guys is these are trends as we see them happening today. And some of the stuff that I have on here is similar to some of the things we were sharing in talks last year. So in other words, we really do see some of these things as trends. But for you, I think what it means is you got a whole world of challenges and opportunities out there, particularly if the direction continues to go where people are more and more interested, whether it's socially or it's environmentally and so forth, of using plants as part of the lifestyle even more so than what we thought about them in the past. So I think those are opportunities for you. So again, and to my close is you got to keep looking around the corner because you never know what you're going to find new. Okay, that's it. That's all I got.
Cool. So some questions.
Questions,
Sure.
comments, tomatoes.
I guess you guys are really more like the producers and the wholesalers, those like that position in like the market, and you were talking a lot about the trends like community gardens, and like how does Ball see themselves really reaching out to those types of people? Because right now that's not really who you guys, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Are you guys gonna make like the technology to grow the vertical green walls for them to sell, like for then your retailers to sell, or
No,
how's that relationship gonna work?
we may not, but at the same time, it helps us in understanding how the consumer is interested in using plants. And so if what we need to work on are, whether it's specific varieties of vegetables or whatever it might be, whatever the plant is, to perform in these ways, then that tells us what we need to be working on from a breeding direction. The idea, if vertical gardening really does take off, and it's possible that it will in certain areas, whether it's because of lack of land space or whatever the reasons might be, then we've got one of the things we should be working on are plant products that perform well vertically. So that's how it helps us. And as it relates to things like community gardens and gardening education and so forth, it's a way to help convey to us that the idea of gardening is maybe coming back from what it was back in the 80s and 90s, but in a very different form or for a very different purpose. But it still means that people are going to want to have plants that perform in that kind of garden. And if you think about a community garden is probably set up with pretty lousy irrigation, because you're not going to spend a whole lot of money on a vacant piece of property to set up a community garden. It's going to be with whoever can hook up a hose nearby. So you've got to be able to create products that sustain themselves well in those kinds of environments. So it helps us that way too as well. So that's why we pay attention to these kinds of trends. And you're right, we don't sell to consumers directly. We never will. We sell to the supplier, to the retailer who sells to the consumer. But ultimately what we produce is a product you and I buy in the store. So we have to know what you want. We have to know what you want and what you want to use it for. Both of those.
Could you speak a little more on the idea that the plants are going to be chosen not only for the genetic makeup but how they're grown? Is that idea talking more of they're going to be in an urban setting, or is that more towards we need them on that programmable cycle where you want your poinsettia for your Black Friday?
I think both of what you're suggesting, I think, is part of it. It's certainly the programmable from the idea of hitting retail promotions, particularly for the chains, and I keep pointing to the chains because that's where a lot of volume is driven. But I think it also has to do with how people want to use plants too as well. We might be coming up with a great, maybe just pick something out of the head, trailing vinca or something like that we just think is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But what we may not really realize is how that product is actually being used if there's some interest, whereas the grower who's a bit closer than we are, because they're supplying to the retailer, may understand that a little bit better and figure out how they can grow it so that it meets whether it's either specifications about how it sits on the retail shelf or ultimately what the consumer is looking for too as well. So I think it's both of those. What else? Good questions.
I wanted to ask a little bit about how you mentioned that people, consumers specifically, are very, very overwhelmed when they go into a garden center. And one of the things that I've found with retail in general is that a lot of cases people hate talking to a person, sounds really weird, but like you go into like a car dealership, the last thing you want is somebody, hey, can I help you?
Right.
With that type of thing.
Right, because they feel it's going to be a hard sell.
Yeah. And one of the really cool things that incorporates making the retail simpler with social networking is that the little smart tags that are appearing on lots and lots of things. I know my family, we just reprinted all of our tags so that they have a little smart tag insignia on them, so that anybody who has a smartphone can just snap an image of it, and then it automatically takes them to our website and gives them all the information that they would need to know about that plant. And so like even if they lose the tag or something, they can still just find that link immediately. And it has all the information that they need.
Right, that's right. And we're going to do something similar with the Perfect Home Garden line next year. We couldn't get it all pulled together for this spring as it relates to getting it on the tag and so forth. I don't know what the reasons are. We just couldn't get our act together on it. But we're going to start doing it next year. And you're absolutely right, because I mean, for almost any product anymore, you do the research online first. For something that you're going to spend some money on, or for something that you're really not all that knowledgeable or familiar with. I mean, we all do that. It's not just you guys, but you know, us old folks do the same thing. Just because it's all out there, it's accessible. But you're absolutely right, because you don't want to walk into a store sounding stupid or feeling stupid, or you don't know what questions to ask, or you don't want the hard sell put at you. So you do all your research first.
Additionally, I feel like that would be a great way for consumers to communicate directly with the companies themselves, because if everybody could go on and like review this plant basically, like, oh well, I got this plant and I planted it in this environment and it did very poorly,
right,
or so and so. Could be a great venue for feedback.
Right. With the Wave campaign that we've had going, we started a Wave fan club, and we tried to do some of exactly what you're talking about. We have maybe 1,000 people signed up, and they get regular email blasts from us, but we also hear back too as well. And we'll also, and Wave is on Facebook, and we have somebody in the office who literally maintains it every day, and she's communicating back and forth with people who post, and then people are posting back and forth to each other too as well. It's not just communicating back to us, the company, but they're also communicating with each other. What works, what doesn't work. I had this experience, it was great. I had this experience, it was lousy. I tried this, and you kind of create a, literally an online community that way. But it is a great way of getting that direct feedback from the consumer. That's right.
How do you think that relates to sales? Like,
I think it has. I think it can have an influence in the sense that if consumers become more comfortable with the product, or they've had good success with it, or they read from somebody else who's like them that they had good success with it, that's a much better testimonial than me from Ball telling them that they're going to have a great success with it. So I think I think it can have a positive influence on it. The challenge is can you get enough people communicating back and forth so that collectively it could have an impact on sales. So it's trying to build that community. I hate to use the cliches, the terms, but that's literally what you try to do, is build the communities large enough so that you have that kind of influence, as well as get the feedback back too as well. I mean, what's not to just pick on Wave, which is the trailing petunia, but it's the
You might just take, not to interrupt.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I did interrupt. You might at some point
Explain what it is.
say a moment or
Yeah,
two
we are.
about
Let me
this
quick
Wave
background
petunia.
first. The Wave is a trade name, a brand name, consumer brand name for a trailing petunia that we created about 15 years ago now. And it was the one product, one item that we decided to try to market directly to the consumer by putting a retailer or a consumer brand to it, Wave. And worked on it year in and year out for 10, 11, 12 years. And it's taken us that long to finally get enough traction with it that some people will actually come into the store asking for Wave by name. We're finally to that point. Or if you walk into a store that's selling it, you might recognize it because it's always in a pink pot or a pink small container like a 6-pack, and it's got the Wave logo on it and so forth, and it is a petunia, and hopefully it's in color when you're buying it. But it's also a great garden performer because it takes the heat, it comes back after a rainstorm, it fills the landscape because it's trailing, and so forth. And in fact, we have different versions of Wave that have a little bit different kinds of habit, but all do the same kind of thing. So it's a product that works, number one. And so it's the combination of it being a good product over the years, as well as a lot of promotion that we put behind it directly to the consumer that's kind of built a little bit of recognition. And so now we're playing off of to what you're talking about, really trying to connect more directly with the consumer through the various social media things that we're doing. It's probably the one big product consumer brand success story that Breeder has, because at least there's some recognition of it now. That's hard to do. Because if you think about it, particularly as it relates to flowering annuals or any seasonal plant product, people come out and buy it once a year. It's not like buying toothpaste that you buy every month. You buy it once a year. And come December or January, you may or may not remember how well that product performed for you last year, or whether or not you liked it, or where you put it, and so forth. And so you're starting over again the next year. So it's a real challenge for this industry to get consumers to come back time and time again asking for the same product. You've got to put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, with a product that takes so much money to put in to get it to that status, like where does it start to become profitable?
When you hit big volumes?
Hoping that it'll become that.
Yeah, to some degree, yes. Yes, that's right. Yeah, and with a product like Wave, for example, because it has been a success, we're looking at products that are used similarly in the garden, and not giving them the Wave name, but trying to attach them to the identification of Wave as a plant that's going to perform for you, doing the same kinds of things, similar kinds of things. So, but it does take a lot of effort, and you really have to decide up front how much you want to invest in product promotion and so forth, assuming that you're going to build the volume to be able to pay for it. It's a big challenge. What else?
Do you find that like the additional processing that you might have to do for like making plants easier so people don't have to like get down on their hands and knees like they have in the past can like almost like get in the way of like goals of becoming more sustainable because now you have to like put more energy and resources into them?
Maybe. What we're finding, for the last several years, what we've been talking about is consumers have moved from gardeners to decorators. In other words, what they like is to be able to buy fully finished, fully in color plants that can come home, put into a container, whether it's a single product in a container or a mixed product in a container, and have that instant color. And have, I don't know, a half dozen pots around the patio or around the yard and so forth, rather than planting the beds of impatiens and so forth that the prior generation did. But it's more than just decorating. I think there's an interest in people wanting to do more to beautify their home, and the yard is an extension of the home anymore these days, in which you can see through the proliferation of all the outdoor furniture and grills and heaters and outdoor plasma TVs that you can buy. I mean, it gets crazy after a while. But it is an extension of the home. As it relates to things like sustainable care, I think for the average consumer, the biggest thing they're probably concerned about is, am I watering too little or watering too much?
Like for like you, like us, like just like or any business that has to like make these, do you think that like they have to now be putting in more like energy or whatever than like they used to, like make it like more preset than it has been?
Yeah, that's the challenge there is the size and the condition that you want the product to be on the shelf at retail. That's where the challenge comes in, is between the supplier and the retailer. How big do you want the plants at retail? How much do you want, a few plants to occupy a lot of space? Do you want to sell a lot of smaller plants and so forth? But that's where the challenge comes in for trying to figure out what the consumer wants, so that you can provide them the product at the stage that it's at to meet the immediate gratification need.
On that same topic, don't you feel like there's kind of a contradiction between growing plants that are programmable so that a grower can produce 200,000 of them for one particular weekend, and they all have to be exactly uniform, that a computer could grade that they're uniform, versus this general trend that you seemed to illustrate at the beginning, that it was all sustainability, eco-minded, home gardening, that type of very situational, non-uniform condition and just non-uniform demands. It seems to me like that
They're in contradiction with each other?
Very contradictory.
I agree.
With each other.
I completely agree with you. Yes. And it really, we don't know how the industry will continue to evolve. If we were able to predict, obviously we'd all be millionaires. One thought, it's just my one thought, is as it relates to the products that the growers feel that they absolutely have to program, it's actually just what you described. Mm-hmm. It's the plant and it's typically an annual, if you think about the volume, that they have to produce a couple 100,000 of that all finish very uniformly at the same time, which is the ultimate grower's challenge and so forth. But that's for that product that is how do you guys describe this? It's that basic plant product that the mass consumer is going to buy.
A petunia.
A petunia, a marigold, or whatever it is, exactly. On the one hand, I guess where I'm headed is with that kind of product, we're getting to a level of, I don't know what you call it, whether it's not sophistication, because that's not right, but a level of programming of people buying it in volume that they're so accustomed to it that they want it instantly because they've had repeated success with it. So they know exactly what they want, they know exactly how they want it to perform. So it needs to look a certain way in the store, otherwise they're not going to buy it because they already have an expectation. Whereas you go to the other end of the spectrum, which is some of this more environmental thinking and so forth, and sustainable thinking and so on, we're not anywhere near that level of experience, and so we probably have a different set of expectations. It's all relatively new to us.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.